Hello, this is Brian Rowe with LSNTAP. We've got a great presentation today put on by Legal Services Corporation on GIS mapping. It walks you through the basics of how to do GIS mapping with Google Fusion tables.
I'm Christina from LSC. I also want to thank Mara Pelletieri. If any of you are familiar with LRI on LSC's website, Mara provides content to that site, and she's helped coordinate this process. So this has been a collaborative effort. And you can reach out to either of us with any follow-up questions after today's meeting. So let's talk about our let's talk about what we're going to do today. First, kind of a frame to look at this. To make a map, you need to know how to use mapping software, and this is going to be a very simple software that you can, when this is over, that you can go and make a map this afternoon. But the other two pieces are where to access data to map and how to manage your data. So we're going to be talking about all three of these concepts today. So today we're going to set up Google Fusion tables. We're going to talk about how to structure information so that you can map it, so that it is map ready, if you will. We're going to talk a little bit about data management, and it's a part of the skill that we're developing, and it's going to translate into any mapping software that you use. So that's going to kind of be a theme, a recurring theme today. We're going to create a basic map of addresses, and we're going to share and publish the map. Then we're going to combine data from two different sources, and we're going to customize the map with colors and filters. And at the end, we're going to have a quick discussion about some starting points to get data for you to map. So Google Fusion Tables is a free application. It works within Google Drive, which is a file storage, sharing, and collaboration system that many of you might be familiar with. Google Drive offers many different apps, and Google Fusion Tables is just one of the apps. You would be able to share your Fusion table with others and collaborate with them. You could share with specific people or make it public for anyone, and you can set permissions levels so that it could be a read-only type share or a collaborative share where they can edit it too. And you can publish your map on your website just like you would a YouTube video. So in order to get started with Google Drive, you need a Google account. There are a few ways to do this. If you have a Gmail account, then you already have Google Drive. If you have a different type of email account, like a Yahoo or a Hotmail, you can create a Google account using that email. You don't have to open a new Gmail. Or finally, your organization may want to set up a corporate account, and at LSC we have done that. So I log into Google Drive using my LSC email, and for 501c3 nonprofits, you are eligible to get a free corporate account. If anyone wants to know more about that later, reach out, and we'd be happy to share a little bit more information we know about that. And once you're in Google Drive, we need to actually enable the Fusion Tables app. So to get started, you would go to your Drive, which would be at drive.google.com, and log into your account. Then you're going to click the red Create button, and there are some apps already there by default, but we need to connect the Fusion Tables app. It's not here yet. So let's click Connect More Apps. This is going to bring up a catalog of many different apps that are available through Google Drive. There's a little search box in the top right corner of that window, so we're going to search for the Fusion Tables app. You type it in right there and push Enter, and then you would find the Fusion Tables app and click Connect. Google Fusion Tables will ask you if you want to set it to be the default app for those files, so just say OK. And then you get a little message saying that it was successfully connected. So now that it's connected, you can, the next time that you click the red Create button, you now will have Google Fusion Tables as another app in this menu. Okay, if you have any questions or issues getting set up with that, or you need to know how to contact Google, feel free to contact us and we can help any way that we can. Are there any questions? Please chat any questions that you have at any time, and we'll periodically take a little break for questions. So if there's nothing so far, let's proceed. So our first project is going to be to map office locations for our program. So I'm picking on Northwest Justice Project. It's a statewide program in Washington State, and we're going to map their office locations. Here's a screenshot of what we want our final product to look like. We just need a pretty basic map. It shows all of our office locations, and we'd also like it to have these pop-ups providing general information about each of the offices. So overall, these are the steps we're going to take. We're going to first start out in Excel, and we're going to structure excuse me, the information so that it is ready to map. Then we'll load the data to Fusion Tables and create the map. We will set up our custom info window, and then we will share and publish the map online. Okay, so like I said, we're starting out in Excel. So here, this is an Excel spreadsheet. We're starting out in Excel because it's really easier to manipulate the data here than in Fusion Tables, and this is something that many of you, probably all of you, are already familiar with. So here's what.
I have a quick question here, which is, what type of files would the Google Fusion app open besides these tables? If I'm making a map, and I may want to make it default depending. Is it just going to be these tables?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that's just a question and if I'm not mistaken, you're referring to...
Right, when you go to set it up.
So this slide, yeah, it's just going to ask you this question.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so back to Excel. Thank you, Brian. Back to Excel. So there are a couple things I want to point out in terms of how I've organized this spreadsheet. You have a header row, and every one of the header column headings is labeled with something that makes sense. And for each of my other rows, each of them represent information about one of the office locations. You don't want any merged cells. Don't bother using fancy formatting. It's not going to carry over. So this is just pretty simple, pretty basic. And one other thing, when I pulled this data set, it had these 4 columns with the location. So it had the street address, the city, the state, and the zip code separately. And that's great, but Fusion Tables needs your address to be all in one column. So I added column L, where I combined all of the pieces of the address into one single string. The other thing that I did is that I cleaned it up a little bit. So, for example, here it has Suite 407, and I went ahead and removed that because it's just going to map the building. And Fusion Tables could probably handle that suite number, but since it's only a few locations, I went ahead and cleaned up the addresses. And I can keep these columns, D through G. They're not going to hurt anything. There might be a reason why I'd want them later on. So I'm just going to keep them, but you definitely want to have a column It could be the first column, the second column, the last column, but you need a column where the full address is all in one place. Okay, let's see, what else should we point out here? All of our other columns, they have a discrete piece of information, so I've not combined, for example, phone number and toll-free number. Each item has its own column. So that is, how you should organize your data, to have each attribute about the locations have its own column. So just to recap, and why did we start with Excel? We talked about this already. We're familiar with it. It's easier to manipulate data, and we're going to upload this Excel file to our Fusion tables. And regarding our spreadsheet, we have our column header with labels. We have one row for each location. We have each attribute in its own column, and we have the full address in a single column. I don't have any merged cells, no special formatting, and most importantly, if there's any other data that you're going to want for this project later on, add it now if possible. At this point, it would be easy to add a column. Later on, it's going to be a little bit more tricky, so think about what you want your final product to look like, and at this stage, compile, gather all of that data into your Excel spreadsheet. Okay, so now that we have set up our Excel spreadsheet, we are ready to load it into Fusion tables. So this is what my drive looks like. I'm going to first click on my red Create button. Let's make this bigger. My red Create button, and I want to create a new Fusion table. Okay, so I have a couple options. I could upload something from my computer. If I have it in a Google spreadsheet, I could do that. Or if I create an empty table with nothing in it, starting from scratch, I could do that. But since, as we discussed, it's easier to set up in Excel or in a Google spreadsheet, that's what we're going to be doing. So I'm going to upload, choose File. I'm just going to navigate to my Excel file. Yep, that's it. Okay, and click Next. Here it's giving me a preview of what that data is. So, yep, that is exactly the data I wanted to upload. Let's click Next. And here I can enter some more information. I can rename it here. So let's rename it Northwest Justice Project Office Locations. And if I had any other information I wanted to associate with it, I could enter it here. So let's finish. And there is my Fusion table. Okay, so I'm noticing right off the bat, well, first of all, here in bold are my column headers. And I'm noticing that this is highlighted in yellow. So I want to look into why that might be. I'm going to click this little down arrow and click Change. This is going to change information about this column. And on Type, it has location. So let's talk a little bit about the different data types. Okay, so there are 4 different data types that are recognized by Fusion tables. The first is text, and this would be descriptive information. The next is number. And just because it's a number doesn't mean it should be a number data type. For example, a zip code would probably be a text or a location data type. So if you would perform math with those numbers, like add, maybe get the average of all of the poverty population in each county, you wouldn't get the average zip code. That wouldn't make any sense. So that's kind of your rule of thumb. Just because it's a number, it not necessarily would be a number data type.
So we've got a quick question here, which is how important is it to clean up the address lines and really make that data exact? And how good is Google at figuring it out if we leave suite numbers or other stuff in there?
It's pretty good. There are a couple things that we can do later on that I'll show you to improve their ability to find the addresses. For example, a PO box is not going to work. So if you're doing like hundreds of cases and some of them have PO boxes, just know that they're not going to map successfully. Or but for this case, I think it's kind of a cost-benefit analysis. I had 17 offices, so it was easy for me to just clean it up a little. I would not, try not to have typos in the street address. If you have abbreviations like BLVD instead of boulevard, that is totally fine. So yeah.
If you have any tips for dealing with PO boxes, I know that a lot of organizations would definitely be interested in that.
Well, a PO box is, I think a map is only as good as the data that you collect. So if the PO box doesn't actually represent the client's residence, then it's going to map, like probably could map the the postal office, right, where you're. Okay, so if you'd want to map the county, that we will get into later. If you would want to not map the exact location, but rather map like how many clients in the whole county as an aggregate. Is that what you were thinking, Brian?
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, okay. We'll get into that later. But for right now, our assumption is that we're mapping exact locations. Yeah. So, okay, so we have locations, which come in two varieties. One is the one column and the other is the two column. So, for example, if you have the latitude and longitude coordinates of the addresses that you're mapping, you could have latitude in one column and longitude in another column, and you could do it that way. But if you don't, then Fusion Tables is going to handle it for you. And back when we were in our Excel spreadsheet and I said that we needed to have one column with the full address, this is why, because your options are one column or two columns. So we need to have the full address in that one address column. And the last data type is date and time. So this will accept any of the standard formats that you might be familiar with, and will interpret it as date and time. Okay, so back here on our, so we were in the org name column, and Fusion Tables has assumed that this is a location column, and it's not. It should be a text column. So as an aside, a place name might be a good location. For example, if you have, if you have White House and you designate that as a location, Google Fusion Tables will actually map the location of the White House. You wouldn't need to put the address of the White House there. So that's why it assumed that this org name was a location. Usually, I haven't tested to see how good it is. I wonder if you put in like library names or hospital names, if it would do that, but I haven't tested that thoroughly to see how good it would be. But in any event, Fusion Tables thought that this was a location column. It's not. It's a text column, so I'm going to save that change. Likewise with city, it thinks that we want this to be a location column, but in this case, we just want this to be a text column because we have our full address. It's going to be much more precise than just the city center of Seattle. We have our exact address. And let's just make sure, yep, Fusion Tables has recognized this as a location column, so we are all set. Okay, so it is time to geocode. So what is geocoding? That is, as I mentioned before, with websites that can find the latitude and longitude coordinate for you, this is the process of using that address to find the exact location. So you could go to another service and have your latitude and longitude coordinates, or Fusion Tables will do it for you. And if you're doing hundreds of addresses, this could take a minute or so. So we're going to go to File, Geocode, and we need to select the column that we want it to geocode. It has defaulted to the full address column, which is correct. That's the column we want it to geocode. And then here, this is something I alluded to a couple minutes ago, we can add a location hint. So for example, I'm going to put in Washington, United States, and that's going to save Fusion Tables from looking in like Olympia, Greece, as opposed to Olympia, Washington. It's just going to narrow the universe, literally the universe, of where it is searching. So let's begin geocoding. Okay, so we had a question. How specific does the address have to be? Can you work with just a zip code instead of a full address? Yes, you can. It will put the dot on the geographic center of that region. If you're working with zip codes, then, or with another area, then you might want to tune in next week because we're going to be talking about how to map information that will show the full shape of the zip code. So you don't have a dot representing it. You have the shape. So yes, so I'll talk about that a little bit more later. And again, tune in next week to talk more about mapping shapes. Okay, so we have geocoded. That's great. And we are, there are no more questions. We're going to move forward. So I'm ready to create the map. All right, I want to draw your attention to these tabs up here. So by default, you have a rows tab, which is what this looks like. It looks like kind of like a chart or a table. Then we have a cards tab, which just shows your data in this format. And then if Fusion Tables has detected that you have a location column, it's going to go ahead and give another tab, which is going to be a map tab. And here it is. Here's our map. If you don't have this map tab, you can just click on this red plus button and just add more tabs to your heart's content. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So let's zoom in. And here is the beginning of our office location map. Okay. So the next thing that we want to do is that we want to customize the info window. So by default, anytime you click on one of these markers, it is showing a little window that has all of the information from the column headers from your data set. So if you want to customize that, this window that appears, we can do that. You can go to Change Info Window. And here we see two things. On the left, we see these checkboxes, and each of these items in the checkbox are the column headers that were in our data set. So you can, well, and on the right, we see some HTML code. So if you don't know HTML, don't worry about it. What we can do is we can just toggle on and off these checkboxes to display or not display that information in our map info window. So let's say that this particular map, we're going to put on our intranet. It's just going to be for our office staff. So we don't need the org name. And And we don't need the client intake number, but we do want the fax number, just supposing. So I've checked and unchecked the boxes as necessary, and click Save. So now all of your, for all of your locations, the info window has been updated. So a little bit more about the info window. It is, right now, we have just some very basic information. We've got text information, basically. But if you want to take this further, you could include links to other sites. You could include images, videos, charts, and graphs as a part of your data set. And as such, they would appear here in this left column so that you could toggle them on and off so they could be incorporated into your info window. And for those of you who are familiar with HTML and you want to do some further customization, if you click on the Custom tab, you'd be able to edit the HTML yourself, which would let you change the font sizes, colors, the format, let you edit the labels, and so on. But for many of us, this is just fine without editing the HTML. It's going to suit a lot of the needs for a lot of the maps that we are going to be creating. Okay, I want to take this moment to reiterate what I said before about setting up the data before you even load it to Fusion Tables. Because if right now someone came to me and said, oh, we also want to display the office hours, what time they're open and closed each day. Well, that would be kind of a problem because I don't have that information in my data set. I'd have to take some extra steps to add it in. And so, again, back in that Excel spreadsheet stage, that's the best time to add any information in that you're going to want down the road. Okay, so here we are. Now, the next thing we want to do, that we have edited our info window. And feel free to throw any questions if you have any. The next thing we want to do is that we want to share and publish this map so that we can embed it on our website. So I want to take a moment to talk about sharing and publishing. And if you've worked with Google Drive, other documents in Google Drive, this is going to sound familiar to you. So first, sharing. It means giving permission to access. So you could share with specific individuals or a group, and you can give specific levels of access. Question from one of the participants. If we go back to the spreadsheet to add another column, do we have to go back through all the steps again, or will it automatically update? So no, it would not automatically update. If let's say, my hypothetical situation, I wanted to add the office hours to my map, I would could do several ways, several methods, but basically it would take a lot more steps. You might have to go back to the Excel spreadsheet, add that column in, re-upload, reconfigure any of the settings you had. So again, it would be easier just to do it from the outset before you upload it in the first place. Okay, so back to sharing and publishing. So as I was saying, you can give individuals specific levels of access, read-only, or you can allow them to edit it. And the other concept is publishing, and that means making the document available to those people with whom you've shared. So you could publish by embedding your map online, or just simply by sharing the link to your Fusion table, like via an email, for example. So sharing and publishing are kind of linked, interdependent concepts. You could share it, but if you don't publish it, no one is going to know it's out there. On the other hand, if you publish it, but you haven't shared it with enough people or with the right people, then your audience isn't going to have permissions to open it. So we need to do both of these things. First, I'm going to click back in my Fusion table. I'm going to click Share. And the default is private. So let's say that I wanted to share this with my colleague Mara. I would, down here, enter her email address, specifically the email address that's associated with the Google account that I want to share with. So if I enter her email address, but she doesn't have a Google account, then at this stage, in this setting, she wouldn't be able to see it. So luckily, Mara has a Google account associated with her LSC address, so I'll just click Send. And then she has now in her inbox an email from me saying that I've shared this with her, and she can go check it out. If I want to change her permissions, I just do that right here. We can let her edit. It'll be okay. And then, but what if so this would work if I just want to share it with a couple specific people within Fusion Tables. But if I want to publish it online, then I'm going to need to share it with the whole world. I can't do it person by person, obviously. So over here, I'm going to just change the overall settings. And I'm going to select anyone with the link. So just want to show you, because I have the corporate account, I see some more options. But if you are using a personal account, these are the 3 options you would see. And you want to select anyone with a link, and that's going to allow folks to see your map on the internet. So I would select anyone with the link and click Save. Okay. And the next thing I need to do is here on my Map tab, I'll click this little arrow and click Publish. So this is giving me 2 things. It's giving me a link that I could use if I wanted to email it to specific people, or if I want to embed it, it's giving me a snippet of HTML code. So you would embed this into your website just like you would if this were a YouTube video, for example. And once you've copied and pasted the snippet into your website, it would look like that. So here I have all the same functionality. I have my info windows and so on. And someone has noted that you have to be very careful publishing anything with client data in it, certainly. So that is always a consideration, privacy concerns. So just to give you a heads up, if you publish without sharing, you will get an error message of a sad robot, which will show you that you've not shared, set up your sharing settings to anyone with the link. So are there any questions? People are sending questions in as you go, but okay. When you publish, does it clip the map to the visible size on the screen? Not necessarily. So over here, see these width and height? So if I, for example, actually in this example, this is, I think, 600 pixels by 400, and I, you might embed it and then be like, oh, that's too small. And then here you could, like, let's say I wanted to be 600. So if you notice, this has changed to a 600. And then let's say I want 400. This has now changed to 400. And if for those who are more familiar with HTML, there's some other, you can tinker with this HTML code, but so that I hope answers your question. So you could adjust like where the default view is, like is it here or is it here, you could adjust where the what the zoom level is, so you can play around with that. But by default, it's going to be the same like snip that you see on the screen, and then to adjust the size that you publish it on your map on your website, just change this height and width right here. Any other questions before we go on? Okay, so let's proceed with something a little more advanced. So for this project, let's suppose that some advocates in my office are working on education issues, and they've seen a rash of cases involving school suspensions, especially involving middle school students. And they want to have more data to understand any regional patterns and if they should focus their outreach or community education efforts in a specific town or a specific area. So this is what our map is going to look like when we're finished. And each of these dots represent a school, and the dots are coded by the number of students with more than one out-of-school suspension. We're going to, again, not go through this in detail, but as with any project, you would structure information so that you could map it and structure it from the outset. Then for this project, we're going to combine information from two different data sources. We're going to customize the map with colors and filters. And we're going to set up, well, we're not going to go through this in detail, but again, you would set up a custom info window and share and publish the map. Take a momentary break. Had a question come in. Is there a way to clip a finished map to a Word document rather than to a website? So these maps are web-based. So like here, we are interacting with the map. The other thing is that if let's say that I had a new office and I added it into my data set, where I published it, it would refresh automatically. So these are web-based, a web-based tool. So since a Word document is not a web-based tool, what you could do is you could take a screenshot of it. It wouldn't let you interact with it. It would just be an image, just like this is an image right here. So you could take a series of screenshots, and that might meet your needs. Okay. Any other questions? Send them this way. Why, just taking a step back, why are we going to talk about combining information from two different data sources? And it's because you may not find, when you're out searching for data, you may not find all of the information in a single data set. So you might find that on occasion, you're going to need to combine information from multiple data sources. So we're going to practice that. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do is gather the data. So I found that on the website for the National Center for Education Statistics, I was able to download information about schools. So there's the URL in case you're interested in finding information from your area. But I was able to download this information about schools, and let's take a look at it. Here it is in my Fusion table. I made a Fusion table of it. So I've got the school name. I've got a classification column that says if it's a preschool, high school, middle school, or so on. I've got the pieces of the address, but as we know, we need the full address in a single column. So we have a column for that, full address. And it's got some more information about the school. But one that I definitely want to point out is this column right here. It says School ID NCES assigned, and that stands for the website where we were on, the National Center for Education Statistics. So we will, this is a unique ID number. All right, back to here. This is a unique ID number, and we'll talk about it in a minute. And it's a unique ID number because what I mean by that is that each school gets a number that belongs only to that school, and there's only one number per school. So it's, if you will, it's kind of like a social security number. In theory, each person has only one, and you only have yours. So it's a unique identifier for the school. Okay, so this is great. I have the location information for every public school in the state of Virginia, but my team is interested in knowing about suspension, so I need to actually get that information too. And I did that on the Civil Rights Data Collection website from ed.gov, and the URL for that is on the screen as well. And on this page, I was able to download statistics about the number of students who had in-school and out-of-school suspensions. It was broken down by student, race, and by sex, actually, too. So my team is focused on, let's just say, a specific geographic region, not the whole state. So I just got information for a 6-county region. So let's take a look at that. And here it is. So this LEA, this means the school district that it is in, school state, the school name, and the school ID number. Okay, we have a question really quickly. If you are mapping client data and you have an address for a multi-unit building and many clients in that building live in that building, will the mapping show one indicator for the site or multiple indicators for clients at that site? So it will show, this is kind of a trick answer, it will show multiple indicators for the clients at that site, but it's going to show them exactly one on top of each other. So you're not going to be able to see them because they're literally, like, the top one is going to be hiding all the other ones. So it will be there for when you want to search or filter, and we'll talk more about that later. So like if you want to display only family cases, so it would help you, the data is still going to be there, but the marker is going to it's going to show one that is actually hiding the others behind it. Sorry about that. All right, so back to our school data. In addition to the information about suspensions and in-school suspensions, and it goes on this way, in this direction, I have also the NCES ID number, and the data from both sources both included that particular ID number. So this is really good news for us, and I'll explain why. What we're going to do is we're going to merge the two tables. So we have one Fusion table that has the address information, and the other Fusion table has the discipline data. And so we're going to merge them into a third Fusion table that is going to combine the location and the discipline data. So why is that ID number important? So Fusion tables needs a matching column to correctly merge the data. So for example, if one data source had a school as C dot, space Hunter space Ritchie space LM period, and then the other one had it as Ritchie space elementary, and I'm emphasizing the spaces because it has to be exactly right. If the two sources listed this school in these two different ways, Fusion tables would not recognize that it's the same school. But luckily, we have that column in both of the data sources that is NCES school ID number. So it's going to be able to match up the schools by ID number so that it can relate the information about that particular school from both places in my merged table. So for your maps, this match could be anything. It could be the case number. It could be maybe you are mapping information about hospitals and you find the unique ID that is used for hospitals. You would use that. It could be anything, and there's many ID numbers out there. But just be familiar with whatever ID numbers exist for the topic that you are mapping, because they're going to come in handy. So let's go back to my data table here, my Fusion table. So what I'm going to do the merge is I'm going to go to File, Merge, and it's showing me all of my Fusion tables. So I need to look through this list and find the one that contains the discipline data, which is this one. Oh, sorry, can't merge the table with itself. Wrong one. Let's try that again. This one, all Virginia public schools. Okay, so here it's asking us to confirm source of match. So again, we need to find the column that contains that ID number. So here it is, NCES ID, and school ID, NCES assigned. So those are the columns we want Fusion tables to look at to make the match. Okay, what we have here is a list of all of the column headings that are appearing in both of the tables. So here are all of the column headings that I had in my suspension data table, and then here you can see there's a yellow portion. These are all of the column headings from the other table. So I can check and uncheck these boxes. For example, I don't need it to show the agency name, that is the school district name, and let's say I'm not interested in whether it's a charter school, just for example, so I can uncheck these boxes so that I only focus on the data I really need. Okay, so now let's merge, and it has created a third Fusion table, which is the merge of the two parent tables. So let's take a look at it. So it's given, Fusion Tables has given it a name by default, but I want to change this so that it makes a little more sense and I can find it later. So let's say discipline data for Virginia public schools. Okay. And again, if there was any other information I want to include, I'd put it in there. Okay. Great. So the next thing that I would do if I hadn't prepared this project in advance would be to file and geocode. But I'd already set that up so that we can have our addresses show up right away. We don't need to spend time waiting for Fusion Tables to geocode. So here are our schools. So right now, all of the markers are the same, these small red circles, but we can give the schools different markers based on some piece of data, and we're interested in how many suspensions they had. So here on Change Feature Styles, I'm going to choose Buckets. And so I'm going to choose the column that I want it to pull from. So I'm interested in total students receiving more than one out-of-school suspension. So here it is, students receiving more than one out-of-school suspension total. Okay, and I can use these plus and minus buttons to add more buckets. So let's say if there were 0 students, mark it green. If there were 1 to 5, mark it green, and then mark this one yellow, and up to 14, we'll mark it purple. and if there were 15 or more, mark it red. So just to take another look at this more slowly, here is where you choose the column that should be driving the color choices right here. The plus and minus buttons are used to add or remove buckets. And then here it says 1 up to 5. What that means is 1 up to 4.9999999. So it's up to 5, not including 5. So this 1 up to 5 would mean schools at which 1 to 4 students received more than 1 out-of-school suspension are going to be marked with a yellow dot. So now that I've set it up the way I want it, I'll click Save. And Fusion Tables has now refreshed my map, applying that style. So now that I've changed some colors, I need to add a legend. So let's go back to the feature styles. And down here, I can add an automatic legend. So I want to click this box for it to show the legend, and I want this to say number of students. And I can pick the position, the place on the map where I want the legend to display. So this works for me. And I'm moving this so that we can see it. Now I have a legend right here. And if I zoom in or out, that legend is just going to stay there. All right, the last thing I want to do with this map is that, it's showing all 122 public schools in this area, but what if I only wanted to see the middle schools? I would need to filter the data. So luckily, if you remember, I had a column called classification that designated whether it was a middle school, a high school, a preschool. So that's going to come in handy now. I'll click the filter, blue filter button, and I'm going to go to my classification column. Here it is. So it has told me that I have 76 elementary schools, high schools, middle schools, one that's unknown. So I'm just going to click middle school, and as you could see, I have a lot fewer dots now. So it's showing me only the middle schools. So what if I want to show only those middle schools that have a larger enrollment? I don't want to see middle schools with just a few number of students. So let's go to filter by my total enrollment column. And it's giving me 2 boxes for the minimum and the maximum. So I want schools with a minimum enrollment of 500. I'll leave the maximum box empty. And a few more schools have disappeared. So I can hide this, give me more space. So now I have filtered the data so it's showing me only what I'm interested in. The next step would be, and I'm not going to go through this in detail since we did it for the first project, would be to adjust my sharing settings so that it's anyone with the link. And then I would go here to publish to get my snippet of HTML code. I'd also want to change the info window to display what I would want it to display. And then when I embed my map, it's going to look like this. So here's my legend, and here are my schools. Right here. So the other thing I want to point out very quickly, and we're almost finished with the program, is that, let's go back to my schools, is that right now I have one map based on this data. But if I wanted to, I could have multiple maps. So all I would have to do is click this plus button and add a map. So this is giving me my same map again. So let's say I probably need to rename this so that I know which is which, and this is middle school out of school suspensions. Okay. And then I could rename this map whatever I was mapping. and I would adjust the settings on this map, and it would be independent of this map. So for example, here's my map on out-of-school suspensions based on the same data set, which additionally contains this information. I also created another map about students referred to law enforcement. So as you can see, you have the ability to create multiple maps based on a single data set. So we have accomplished our goal. Are there any final questions at this point? If there are, please send them in. So very quickly, now that you can map, where do we get data? Say, perpetual question. So here are some data resources. The American Community Survey is really useful, has information on the census and the American Community, the Fact Finder website has information from the census and the American Community Survey. Here again are the two URLs for the sites I use to get the school data. And I encourage you to go to Legal Services of Northern California's website. They have a resource list, and that website is actually how I found these two sites on school data. They have just a compilation of data sources in lots of different topics, so check that page out as well. So as you know, next week we are having part two of this tutorial, part 3 of the series, and we here would like to challenge you to make a map this week. Go ahead and set up your Google account, enable the Fusion Tables app. It's only going to take you a few minutes. Map your office locations, try mapping other data, and if you get stuck, this would be a great week to try to get started, because next week we are going to have another session, so if there's a lot of questions that folks have, we could address it next week potentially. We'd also love to just know if you successfully made a map. We'd love to see what you come up with. Our emails are on the screen, so please reach out if you have problems or if you have success. Next week, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to be mapping areas. So as an example of an area map or a map of polygons is this one found on LRI. And it is not using dots, it's using the shape of the state. So that is next week, and also multi-layer maps. And finally, check out more resources on LRI, and we're adding content all the time. So please reach out if you have any other questions. Will the slides be available for download? I believe they are available for download.
The link is currently in the chat to directly get the slides from SlideShare. Also, the LSNTAP blog has them posted, and they can be downloaded there if you don't want to create a SlideShare account. We also posted a link to a SurveyMonkey survey. We would appreciate the feedback. If you have specific technical questions, also feel free to put them into the survey, and we'll try to incorporate them in next week also.
And if we don't incorporate them next week, we'd be happy to offer support however we can. So even if it's after next week, and please reach out to us with questions or anything that got you stuck. So if there aren't any other questions, thank you to Brian, thank you to Mara here for helping coordinate this, and thank you to all of you for being on the webinar.
Thank you so much for presenting. Greatly appreciated, and I look forward to seeing the one next week.
Great. See you next week.